Today we have with us Sukumar Muralidharan, who is a media analyst and also a well-known journalist. Sukumar, the issue of media control, paid news has been in the air for quite some time. Currently, there is this broadcast regulations which are being sought to be brought. Also, there is this report which has come now from the Election Commission, which has disqualified an MLA for paid news. So, both these things are happening simultaneously. Do you think there is a chance that actually the media will be regulated or will regulate itself?
Well, the directive of the Election Commission disqualifying an MLA, elected MLA of Uttar Pradesh, has no bearing on the media as yet. I mean, there's no punitive sanction of any sort imposed on the media for an obvious misconduct. The entire burden is being borne by the elected representative. No tears will be shed for that, of course, because it is an obvious electoral malpractice. But we have to question how the media has been conducting itself over the last many years. This is not a newly discovered kind of irregularity in the media functioning. And people have been expressing concerns about it in public. The Press Council has gone into this issue at some depth, and the media industry successfully managed to keep that full report out of the public gaze for at least almost several months. And it's only an action under the Right to Information Act which brought that full report into public attention. So this is obviously a beginning. There are two more very high profile cases involving paid news which the Election Commission is currently engaged with. One involves as prominent a personality as the former Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Mr. Ashok Chavan. The other is also a former Chief Minister, Madhu Koda of Jharkhand. So once these cases are determined, I think the public will be more alive and sensitive to the issues involved.
Interesting issue really is that there is no punitive action that can be taken against erring media, print media in this particular case, except perhaps a violation of the Income Tax Act, if any. But otherwise, if they have declared this income as advertisement, there is really nothing that they can be hauled up for or any punitive action that can be imposed on them.
No, it seems that they have not declared that income at all, because I don't think they have categorized that income, whether it's as circulation or as advertising revenue. So there is a possible case to be made under the Income Tax Act, and that is in fact one of the recommendations of that subcommittee of the Press Council, that there should be action under this act. There's also a recommendation which the newspaper industry managed to delete from the first public version of the report, which is that journalists should have better job security, and they should be given the assurance of decent wages as the wage board determines from time to time. As you know, journalists have been moving increasingly to the contract system and have no real job security, which makes it very difficult for them to resist pressures from the other departments. Advertising department says that you carry this story under your byline when it's written by a candidate for election. No journalist who has any regard for his own professional reputation would do it. But when he's on a 2-year contract and he's dependent on the whims of the employer and he's completely has no assurance of job security, then he might well be under pressure to do it.
One issue is of course the wage bill award, but the real issue is that as long as there is this form of contract labor, it's very difficult for the journalists to really stand up to the management and carry paid news under their byline, as you said. So on this larger issue of paid news, which is masquerading as actual news, there has really been no change that has taken place the last so many months that we have seen.
Yes, in fact, that has been the unfortunate the trajectory that the Indian media has chosen since at least the last 15 years or so. I think mid-90s was a kind of crucial threshold when the newspaper industry decided that its main parameter on which competitive advantage would be determined would be price. It wouldn't be the quality of content, or it wouldn't be the quality of the information that you provide to the readership. It would just be price. the Times of India was the leader in that regard, and unfortunately every other newspaper felt compelled to follow that example. So less and less money is going into news gathering. They're using more and more of syndicated, mass-produced, machine-produced stuff, and the emphasis is entirely on advertising and carrying the kind of stories that advertisers would appreciate rather than the reading public.
But nevertheless, from that to paid news is actually a qualitative jump.
Well, there are continuities if you look at the actual trajectory of. Now, if you look at it in the abstract, you might think that they're two entirely different kinds of cases. But in terms of the actual practice of the media, there is a kind of continuity, because once the price competition was unleashed, the next step was that the leading newspaper in the country, the biggest media house, started this initiative called MediaNet, which was that they would bring in public relations firms into their news gathering enterprises, because they said that journalists have limited capabilities of news gathering and the readership has a much wider range of interests. So the PR agencies have a legitimate role to play in news gathering. And they said that we will identify each such story by a label. It was done for a week. After that, there's been no such identification. So the readership is really in the dark about which story is paid for and which is not. So that's the manner in which it started. And then there was a practice of private treaties by which newspapers acquired shares in particular companies free of cost. And the payment was made in terms of advertising space. So the newspaper pumps up the company's public image. When the company comes up with an initial public offering of shares, the newspaper cashes in. So these kind of arrangements started off right from the early years of this millennium and gathered momentum. And if you look at it in that context, along that trajectory, I think paid news is the next step in that logical progression.
Do you think there is any possibility of any shift, or do you think that for all practical purposes the game is up and this is the way it's going to continue?
Well, the print media is facing a crisis. There's no running away from that fact, because 2008 was a very bad year. We all know the year of the global economic downturn. Advertising spending in the economy collapsed, and the print media early 2009 was in very deep distress. And a high-powered delegation from the print media went to the government and met the Minister of Finance and asked for a special kind of bailout package. Now that was extremely undignified for the print media, which has always prided itself on its independence and its integrity and its distance from the government. And this was just prior to the elections being notified. Since then, advertising spending has increased, has picked up, but the signs increasingly are that the print media share is shrinking. More and more, it's going into the electronic media.
But that's a different issue in the sense, but the change from paid news back to real news is not likely to happen, because if the contract system continues as it is doing, plus there is this pressure of advertisement revenue, as you have said, so there is this part of it, the paid news and news masquerading, advertisement masquerading as news is not going to change. Is that the scenario?
It's up to the readership to really bring that pressure to bear, and the readership increasingly, surveys are showing that readers tend to spend much less time on newspapers than before. The volume of newspaper circulation is increasing, but each reader is spending very much less time on a newspaper than before. But if there is a demand that is manifest for quality information, then the obverse of that is that the readership would have to be prepared to pay for it, and that the ridiculously underpriced newspapers that you have today would be really a thing of the past. You need to have a realistic level of pricing to make the newspaper, reinvigorate the newspaper as a source of information rather than entertainment or advertising.
The solution that the government might bring in, some kind of broadcasting regulations, guidelines, etc., really don't address this issue at all, do they?
Well, the bureaucratic kind of solution is going to prove very inadequate to the situation, because we have an authoritative ruling by the Supreme Court that the airwaves are a public asset and they should be used for a public good. Unfortunately, since that judgment was delivered in 1996, we've had this big boom in satellite and cable broadcasting, but entirely driven by the corporate sector. If you look at certain global trends, Murdoch is Murdoch. Murdoch has got the same philosophy, media philosophy, wherever he operates. But if you look at the United States, his Fox News channel has set a much, much lower threshold of quality than his main broadcast enterprise in UK, which is B-Sky B. B-Sky B, in fact, has won year after year Broadcaster of the Year awards in the United Kingdom. Now, what the essential difference is that Fox News does not have much competition, so it can dish out whatever propagandistic nonsense it wants. In UK, there's a BBC, which is a public service broadcaster, which, whatever its faults over the years, and we know that it's not got quite the same reputation that it had before. In fact, much of its reputation in India was unwarranted. It was kind of a legacy of our kind of colonial fixation. But still, it sets a certain standard, and B-Sky B has to measure up to that. So they're not able to plumb the same kind of depths as Fox News is in the United States. So if we had a credible public service broadcaster, that would set a kind of template, and most other broadcasters would not dare to kind of go down below a certain threshold of quality. But that, unfortunately, is not coming, because Doordarshan, which is supposed to be a public service broadcaster, remains under complete bureaucratic stranglehold and completely lacks any kind of journalistic imagination.
Thank you very much for this discussion.